So, welcome back to Friends of Aquatics. I was looking around the other day on Facebook and stuff, and I heard terms such as KH or GH being bandied around when it comes to water parameters, and I looked further and I saw alkalinity, water hardness, soft water, hard water, and I figured this is quite confusing. So I thought I'd take a look into it. Do you know what any of those mean? Turns out I really didn't, so let's take a look together, shall we? Just before we continue, I just wanted to let you know that I'm reading a script which is just behind the camera, so if I'm looking above the camera and not directly into it, that's why. I'm trying to make sure I've got this written down so I can read it out and make sure we both understand what I've researched perfectly. Also, please stick around for the end because I will be asking questions for the community to get back to me to find out what kind of video that I'll be making next. So, moving forward then, so what are we looking at here? So we're looking at GH first, which is often referred to as general hardness. This is part of the parameters that tell you whether you have soft water or hard water. Now what this is referring to is the amount of calcium or magnesium within your water source. The higher the content of either magnesium or calcium, the harder the water. And vice versa, the less in there, the softer the water. Now, as a general rule, if you're using tap water, you'll have a relatively mid-range water hardness, although it'd be best to check with your water supplier as to what you have within your local area. For most aquatic species, however, tap water is generally going to be fine in terms of hardness. Not talking about the rest of the parameters that could potentially cause you problems within your tap water. Unless you're going to have specific species such as discus, or cichlids that require specifically hard or soft water, then generally tap water is going to have a pretty decent hardness for your general fish. The second parameter you will see in your test strips is KH, which rather oddly is used for the terms carbonate hardness, which is initials CH rather than KH, but hey, who are we to argue with that? This measures the amount of carbonates or bicarbonates within your water, and as before, the higher the level of carbonates in your water, the higher the KH. Makes sense, I suppose. The carbonates within your water, that are dissolved within your water, will help prevent a swing into the acidity level within your water, therefore keeping your pH at a higher level. And this is often why it's referred to as alkalinity, or this can be confused with the term alkaline, which refers to water of anything above pH 7.1. So what does this all mean? Well, as a general rule, it means it's important to know the parameters that your fish require for them to have to thrive, I didn't even say the word guys, thrive within your aquarium. What we're going to do is we're going to delve a little deeper into both. So we're going to start by delving into GH. Now we need to know why it's quite important within our aquarium to have a certain level of GH. Like I mentioned before, discus require a certain type of water, cichlids require a completely different kind of water, so to make them thrive you need that kind of water. So the main reason beyond that we really need to know about the GH within our water is something called osmoregulation. Now it sounds quite scientific, I get it, but please bear with me on this. Osmoregulation is a natural process that your fish carry out all the time that balances the saline or the salt level within the water that's in their body to match that's in the water column that they're in. So this means the freshwater fish cannot live in salt water because they can't match that salinity level and survive. And vice versa when it comes to saltwater fish living in freshwater. But on top of that, there's one other reason that we require to have a relatively decent level of GH within our aquariums for fish to survive, and that's the electrolytes. Now I know electrolytes are normally found in your energy drinks and that kind of stuff, but in this case what I mean by electrolytes is the minerals and salts that conduct electricity within the water that will aid your fish in muscle and bone growth. So when you're fried, the calcium will aid in the growth of your fish. It also aids in the development of their gills, improves resistance to diseases, and a whole lot more. And like us, your fish need electrolytes to be able to remain healthy. And the only place your fish can get them is via osmoregulation and drawing them in from the water. So So the real important thing for us to take here as fish keepers, especially the newer fish keepers that aren't going to be so adept at getting around this whole GH and KH situation, is that if we're using a certain water source that has it, we need to keep it stable. We can't just change our water source up and have different amounts in it, because it can cause fluctuations in what the fish will be using for the osmoregulation, and can cause stress and shock to your fish. So moving on to the bigger beast of the two in my opinion, and that's KH. Now I'm sorry for this, I'm going to read directly what I wrote down on the script just to make sure that I don't deviate and I can understand this just as well as you did. So as I've already mentioned, KH measures the amount of carbonates and bicarbonates within your water. But don't worry, if you don't know exactly what they are, that's not why it's important to us. What is important to know about KH within our aquariums is that it essentially forms a protective barrier or a shield around the pH. And I know KH, pH, we're getting into it a lot. Bear with me. How it works is like this. The carbonates will form a protective barrier that will neutralize the acids within our water. Okay, so your aquarium is constantly building up acids. Your fish excrete waste. That waste is ammonia. Ammonia is acidic. The natural bacteria and the nitrifying bacteria turn that aquarium into nitrites, which is even more acidic. Then they turn that nitrites into nitrates, which is even more acidic. So this being the process, you might think, well then why are we having these nitrifying bacteria? Well, essentially the KH stops that acidic compounds building up, and then creating a pH swing the wrong direction and shocking our fish. So essentially the negatives of having the nitrifying bacteria is that it builds up acid, but it also gets rid of the more toxic compounds for our fish. And this is where the KH comes into it to prevent that swing. So as you're building up acidic compounds, your KH is like, nah, go away. And it bats down and it just neutralizes that acidic compound. But in the process, it also depletes itself. And this is one of the biggest reasons we need to do water changes, is to replant that KH within our aquariums to make sure that we still have a healthy stock of KH to defend against those acidic attacks, so to speak. So now you might be thinking, well, Fen, come on, that's easy. All I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go jam my aquarium full of bicarbonate soda, throw a bit of carbonate in there, a bit more coral, make sure there's loads of that carbonate stuff within my aquarium. And that doesn't matter then, there'll be no acidics at all in my aquarium. I won't have to worry about a pH swing. Well, it's not the case. Because as well as neutralizing acids, if it's not neutralizing acids and bringing the pH, and with the acids bringing the pH down, your carbonates are just going to bring the pH up. And likewise, as well as having a swing towards the acid, a swing too far to the alkaline may also be just as bad for your fish as well. What we really want to do within our aquariums, and this goes for GH, it goes for KH, it goes for pH, it goes for pretty much anything we can do, is a stable, steady sort of equilibrium within our parameters. And as long as we have that equilibrium, when it comes to GH and KH, in particular KH, we won't have the pH swings, which can then cause a real big shock to the system of the fish and potentially kill the fish. So what we're really looking for is stability. And it's hard to get that stability when you can't understand truly what it is that we're looking at. And it's not hard to realize when you've really been researching why it's so confusing, because KH in itself isn't just referred to as carbonate hardness or KH, it's also referred to as temporary hardness, as total alkalinity, buffering capacity or buffer, acid neutralizing capacity, but they're all referred to as exactly the same thing, KH or carbonate hardness. So if I have to summarize then, GH and KH are not often looked at as hard as the nitrogen cycle is when it comes to your water parameters in terms of diagnosing disease, noticing what's wrong with your fish. And I suppose it's because they don't tend to swing quite as often as your nitrate level will rise quite so fast. The absolute best advice I can give to anyone, whether they're new or experienced in terms of fish keeping, is to try and keep your parameters stable. Once you have a system that works for you, stick with it. Don't change it unless you have absolutely no other choice, and keep your fish receiving what they've received for the whole time they've been in within your aquariums. A stable GH and a stable KH will prevent pH swings, will prevent shock, and it will aid in keeping your fish in a comfortable, healthy and happy environment. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I wanted to ask a question to you guys, and what I really would like to know is, which of these fish would you like me to do the next 101 video on? I have a choice of 2 fish currently that I would like to do a 101 video on for the beginner of those species, and that is guppies or neon tetras. Now, take a look into the comments and please comment on which one you'd like me to do next. If you keep neon tetras or you want to, and likewise with guppies, let me know and I'll do a 101 care guide for that particular fish. Now, thank you very much for sticking with me, guys. Thank you very much for bearing with this potentially boring and dry subject. Please hit that like button if you liked the video or you learned anything, and hit subscribe for more of these semi-informative videos. Have a good day, guys. The second sort of parameter you're going to see banded around when it comes to hardness is KH. Now KH, excuse me.